Hello everyone, my name is Himanshu Sharma. I'm a full stack developer having experience on Java and JavaScript projects. In this video, we will be creating a Spring Boot application handling different REST endpoints. Let's start and open a web browser and navigate to Spring Initializer website, which is start.spring.io. It's a nice website provided by Spring so that you can initialize your project based on some certain initial configurations. So here I'm going to use Gradle project. Language, I will keep it Java. Spring Boot version is 2.6.2. Changing the artifact ID as practice. We'll keep the packaging as jar and Java version as 11. On the right hand side, we are going to include web dependency since that is the only one we need for this video. And we'll click on generate and you will get this project in a zip folder like this. So I have downloaded it already, and here you can extract the folder from this package and put it as per your convenience. Now let's import this folder in your IDE. You can use any VS Code, IntelliJ, Eclipse. I'm using the IntelliJ, and this is the project it got imported. And we can look over here. We have a build.gradle file where we can see the dependencies we have selected, the web, and along with it, we also get the starter test to test our application. You can navigate to source main Java and you can see that you have a bootstrap file, practice application from where you can start your service. So let's create a folder or a package, and in the controller package we are going to create a controller class which will contain our different methods handling the different kinds of REST endpoints. So we will mark this class as REST controller, which will help Spring to understand that it's a controller class and needs to be loaded accordingly into its context. We will create different methods, and let's start with creating a get handler method which will return a hello world response. And since it's a method we want to listen for get mapping, get requests, so we will annotate it with get mapping annotation, also specifying the path it needs to listen. So we expect this method to listen get data, and on similar grounds we can create other methods, get mapping, get handler, post handler, and I have code already written so that will be help us in speeding up the process. So let me copy that down over here. So here you can see we are creating a post mapping. We just need to import class, and here in the post handling we expect a user object to be listened through the request body and then use that object for displaying the information or returning the information. So we don't have the class now, but we can create one. So let's create a domain class over here. Let's create a package domain, and inside that package we are going to create a Java class as user. Okay, I think I messed up. I moved So let me move it back to the practice. So now we are good to go. Okay, I mistakenly imported the controller on the wrong package. So now I think, yep, now we are good. So we just need to import the user object. So let's import this one from the domain, and in the domain we are going to create some variables for this one. So let's going to create like user ID, and let's create another one username, and we are going to need their setter and getters. So for that, let's create getter setter for user ID, and let's create getter setter for username, and we also need a default constructor since we are going to create a parameterized constructor. So we need parameterized constructor to create our objects, and the default constructor is required by some Java dependencies for handling this object. Okay, so our domain object is ready, and we can close this file. You can go to our controller again. Yep, we are not getting any errors anymore. So we can do the same thing for the other different methods. Let's do one for put mapping, and here also you just need to import the put one, and the same goes for delete mapping like this. Okay, so we have four methods. One is a get handler, another one is post, another one is put handling, another one is delete handling. Let's make this one also get handling. And they all are ex expecting a user object, and accordingly they will respond. And the difference between their request is the post will append post, put will append put, delete will append delete, and the get handling will return hello world. So let's update the get handling, and instead of hello world, make it a bit consistent, and it will now give a get. So I just created a dummy user object and then expect that to return this information. So let's start the application and see how it works. You can simply restart our application. In the meantime, we can just quickly glance through our code. We have created a get handling method which will listen get data path for get requests, set data path for post requests are handled by post handling, and then we have same set data, but this is for put mapping and it will go for put handling. And then we have a delete data path for delete mapping, and for that we have a delete handling method. Let's see, our application is running. Yeah, it's running on 8080 port. And let's go to a terminal, and over here let's try to hit our application 0, and let's hit the get mapping. And we are getting get user information, and we are not getting, no, we are good. Yeah, we are getting user information 123, the user ID, and the username as Himanshu. Now, for other requests, we need to tell that our request is of a particular HTTP method type, whether it's a post, put, or delete. So curl by default is sending get request, so that's why it's hitting the get directly. Here, the request I have this. So this is the request, and the only thing we need to change is nothing. I think we are good. We can just directly use this command. and let's hit it. And there we go. We are getting a post response user information 123 and Himanshu based on the data we are sending. So if we change any value, let's say instead of Himanshu, I write Himanshu Sharma, I should expect that in my response. So similarly, you can try with other requests. So let's say now instead of post, I want to make it a put request. So now if you can see over here, the only difference between these two is that this one is of type post and this one is handling of type put. The path is exactly same. So now I did not make any change in the path over here. The only change I made is the put method. And now if I enter it, I'm getting a response from the put method. So this is how you can validate externally your sys service, but how you're going to test it using your test cases. Before that, let me show you one thing. In the resources file, we have this application.properties. And this is, I told you, we use for configuring your service. Properties file, you can write it as server.port equal to 0. And now if I run my application, let's see what will happen. You can see over here now it's getting a different port. It's not 8080. Earlier we are getting 8080 every time. Now we are going to get a different port every time. So we usually do this configuration on our services because there are chances you might be running different instances of your services on a same machine. So if you don't specify this configuration, your service will try to access the 8080 port every time, and once you run one of the instance, the other instance will not able to start because your 8080 port is already occupied by your first instance. Okay, so now let's move on to the test case. And why I told you about that part is because we are going to perform similar kind of configuration in our test case where we will say that the web environment should also of type random port. And now we will going to use uh, test REST template to test our services. So with this, you can test your methods by sending the calls which we are doing through curl so far. So let's import it. I have these method written so I can use them directly over here. So okay, so here we go. So we are going to write another method, sorry, uh, variable generated port and local server port. So what will happen is whatever random port the service will start during that test case execution, that port will get assigned to the generated port variable and we can use that for hitting our URL. This one and the rest template is actually okay. Let's rename this variable as rest template and that's it. That's how you will write your test case for one. And now you can even stop your application. You don't need to have your application available and running. So now your application is stopped and now we can just simply run this test case and you will see that when you run a test case, it actually loads the whole Spring Boot context. And the reason for that is this annotation, the Spring Boot test. So now we expect that when this application run, it will hit the get request and our this assertion work, which is we are expecting this response from this method. Let's try the same another test file for put request. And here we need to create a user object because we are sending that object as part of request body. So now here what we are doing is we are creating a request object. We have the URL and we expect response to be the request object user ID and the username which we are passing over here. And we will hit use the post for object method of REST template to check our post handling. And again, when we run this test file, it will load the Spring Boot context and test our post method. Yep, you can see over here our test result is successful and there is no error, so our assertion succeed. Now we need to test for put handling. We can use another method for put handling, and that is execute. And let me show you what it will do. Is okay. So in test put handling method, we will test the put handler, and here we are going to define the string URL to test, the request object, and the expected response, which we are doing in the above methods. And we're going to create a headers object which will be injected in the HTTP entity. And here the entity is of type user object, which we are going to send to the user, to the server. And the entity contains the request object which we have created, and accordingly you will define the type here. So if you are creating any other custom type, you can accordingly change the HTTP entity over here. And the response entity, same goes for response entity. Since we are aware that we are sending uh, string response, so we expect that the response entity is of type string, so it will get the string response from here. So we are using the exchange command, hitting the URL and putting specifying the method as put. Since exchange method is a common method, same as curl, it can be used to send any kind of request. So we need a way to specify what kind of request it is. So we are specifying HTTP method.put over here. And let's start this test. And we expect the response, this should be there in the response body as a string. Okay, so that's it in this video, and we will create more videos soon. And that's all from my end. Thank you, everyone. Let me know if you have any queries, questions, or suggestions, and post them on the comments. Thank you.